friends, I am Manish Thokle. Today's video topic is exception handling in Java. So we can say exception handling in Java. A exception handling in Java is a one of the powerful mechanism to handle the runtime errors so that the normal flow of the application can be maintained. We will learn about Java exceptions. Its types and the difference between checked and unchecked exception. Then we see what is the exception in Java. So first one is a exception is an abnormal condition, and in Java an exception is an event that describes the normal flow of the program. It is an object which is thrown at runtime. Then what is exception handling? Exception handling is a mechanism to handle the runtime errors, such as class not found exception, then exception, then SQL exception, then next one is a remote exception, etc. Then we see advantages of exception handling. The core advantages of exception handling is to maintain the normal flow of the application. An exception normally describes the normal flow of the applications. That is why we need to handle exception. Let's consider a scenario. Suppose there are 10 statements in Java program and an exception occurs at statement 5. The rest of the code will not be executed, that is statement 6 to 10 will not be executed. Then when we perform exception handling, the rest of the statement will be executed. That is why we use exception handling in Java. Then we see hierarchy of Java exception classes. Then the Java language throwable class is the root class of Java exception hierarchy inherited by two subclasses. Then we say hierarchy inherited by two classes. So exception, and then we see error. The hierarchy of Java types of the Java exception. There are mainly two types of exception. First one is checked and second one is unchecked. Then an error is considered as the unchecked exception. Then according to Oracle, there are three types of exception normally. So we can see first one is unchecked exception. The difference between checked and unchecked exception: the classes that directly inherit the throwable class except runtime exception and error are known as checked exception. For example, IO exception, SQL exception, etc. Checked exception are checked at compile time, and second one is unchecked exception. Then third one is error. So we can see unchecked exception. The classes that inherit the runtime exception are known as unchecked exception. For example, arithmetic exception. Then second one is the null pointer exception. Then array index out of exception, etc. Unchecked exceptions are not checked at compile time, but they are checked at runtime. So then next one is error. So we can see error exception. Error is recoverable. Some example of errors are out of memory error, then virtual machine error, then then we see Java exception keywords. Java provides 5 keywords that are used to handle that exception. The we see we then we see keywords description. First one is a try. The try keyword is used to specify a block where we should place an exception code. It means we can't use try block alone. The try block must be followed by either catch or finally. Then second one is a catch. So we can see catch exception. Catch. The catch block is used to handle the exception. It must be uh, it must be provided by try block, which means we can't use catch block alone. It can be followed by finally block later. Then we see last one is finally the finally block is used to execute the necessary code of the program. It is executed whether an exception is handled or not. Then we see through. Fourth one is a through. The through keyword is used to through an exception. Then fifth one is we see throws. The throws keyword is used to declare exceptions. It specifies that there may occur an exception in the method. It doesn't throw an exception. It is always used to method signature. Then then we see common scenario of Java exception. Java exceptions. There are given some scenarios where unchecked exceptions may occur. They are follows: a scenario where arithmetic exception occurs if we divide any number by 0, there occurs an arithmetic exception. A scenario, then second scenario, a scenario where null pointer exception occurs if we have a null value in any variable performing any operations on the variable through the null pointer exception. Then third, a scenario where number format exception occurs. Let's see. If the formatting of any variable or number is mismatched, it may result into numbers form exception. Suppose we have a string variable that has characters. Converting this variable into digit will cause because number format exception. Then a scenario where array index out of bound exception occurs when an array exceeds to its size and array index out of bound exceptions occurs. There may be other reasons to occur array index out of bound exception. Then the core advantages of exception handling is to maintain the normal flow of the applications. An exception normally describes the normal flow of the applications. That is why we need to handle exception. Let's consider. Suppose there are 10 statements in the Java program and an exception occurs that statement 5. The rest of the code will not be executed. That is, statement 6 and 10 will not be executed. Then when we perform exception handling, the rest of the statement will be executed. That is why we use exception handling in Java. Hierarchy of Java exception classes. The Java language throwable class is the root class of Java exception hierarchy inherited by two subclasses. Then exception and error. The hierarchy of the types of exception. There are mainly two types of exception. First one checked and second unchecked. So we see checked. The classes that directly inherit the throwable class except runtime exception and error are known as checked exception. For example, IO exception, then second one SQL exception, etc. Checked exception are checked at compile time, and we see second unchecked exception. The classes that is inherit the runtime exception are known as unchecked exception. For example, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, then array index out of bound exception, etc. Unchecked exception are not checked at compile time, but they are checked at runtime. Then error. Error is recoverable. Some example of errors are out of memory error, virtual machine error, then assertion error, etc. Java provides 5 keywords that are used to handle the exception. Then we see keyword. Keyword first, try. The try keyword is used to specify a block where we should place an exception code. It means we can't use try block alone. The try block must be followed by either catch or finally. So this is all about exception handling. Thank you.